He didn't even return my calls after I discovered he'd forged my signature on state documents. After he'd stolen my business license and used my credentials to secure contracts worth hundreds of thousands of dollars, after I'd spent 5 years building my consulting firm from nothing, while working 16-hour days to establish my reputation in the competitive world of environmental engineering, I sat in my office in downtown Riverside watching my phone screen light up with missed calls from the State Business Licensing Division, knowing that my father, David Thornfield, had just destroyed everything I'd worked for while my family called it borrowing and told me I was being dramatic about a simple misunderstanding. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. My name is Alexis Thornfield, and from wherever you're watching this, stay with me. Have you ever discovered that your own family was willing to commit fraud using your identity rather than face their own business failures? The call that changed everything came on a Tuesday morning in November. I was in my office at Thornfield Environmental Consulting, the company I'd built from scratch after graduating with my master's degree in environmental engineering from Westport University. 5 years of 18-hour days, weekend site visits, and building relationships with clients who trusted my expertise in soil contamination analysis and remediation planning. Miss Thornfield? The voice on the phone was crisp, professional, and ominous. This is Jennifer Walsh from the State Business Licensing Division, Fraud Investigation Unit. We need to schedule a meeting with you regarding irregularities in your business filings. My stomach dropped. Irregularities? What kind of irregularities? We've received reports of unauthorized use of your business license number for contracts that appear to exceed your registered scope of services, specifically construction management and general contracting work that your environmental consulting license doesn't cover. I stared at my computer screen, pulling up my business registration. Thornfield Environmental Consulting was licensed for environmental assessment, soil testing, contamination analysis, and remediation planning. Nothing involving construction management or general contracting. I'm sorry, but there must be a mistake. I've never done construction or general contracting work. That's what we need to discuss, Ms. Thornfield. According to our records, contracts totaling $340,000 have been signed using your business license number for construction projects in Millerville County. The clients are reporting significant delays and quality issues, and when they contacted your listed business address, they were told to call a different number. My hands started shaking. What different number? A number that connects to Thornfield Construction Services, operated by a David Thornfield. Would you happen to know Mr. Thornfield? The world tilted sideways. David Thornfield was my father, and Thornfield Construction Services was his failing contracting business that had been hemorrhaging money for the past 2 years. Miss Thornfield, are you still there? Yes, I'm here. David Thornfield is my father. There was a pause. I see. Miss Thornfield, I need you to understand the seriousness of this situation. Using someone else's business license to obtain contracts is considered business identity fraud. If these contracts were signed using your credentials without your knowledge or consent, that's a felony. And if I did know about it, then you're potentially facing charges for operating outside your license scope, fraudulent business practices, and conspiracy to commit fraud. After hanging up, I sat in my office staring out at the Riverside skyline, trying to process what I just learned. My father had somehow been using my business license, my professional credentials that I'd worked 5 years to establish, to sign construction contracts that his failing company couldn't qualify for on its own. I pulled out my phone and called Dad directly. Alexis! His voice was overly cheerful, the way it got when he was nervous. How's my successful daughter doing? Dad, I just got a call from the State Business Licensing Division. They said someone's been using my license number to sign construction contracts. The silence that followed was deafening. Dad? Sweetheart, I can explain. Explain what exactly? Look, it's not what it sounds like. I needed some help getting a few contracts, and your business license has such a good reputation, and I thought maybe we could work together. You've been forging my signature on contracts? I wouldn't call it forging, more like using the family business credentials. Dad, Thornfield Environmental Consulting is not a family business. It's my business that I built with my credentials and my reputation. But we're family, Alexis. What's yours is mine, right? Besides, it's all Thornfield construction work anyway. I'm just using your license to help legitimize the business. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Dad, those aren't my credentials to share. I'm licensed for environmental consulting, not construction management. You can't just use my license for whatever work you want to do. Alexis, you're making this sound worse than it is. It's just paperwork. The clients are getting their projects done, everyone's happy, and it's helping the family business succeed. What clients? The state investigator said there are complaints about delays and quality issues. Another pause. Well, there've been a few small problems, but nothing we can't handle. Dad, how many contracts are we talking about?
Alexis, you're getting worked up over nothing. This is all going to blow over. The investigator mentioned $340,000 in contracts. Is that accurate? Look, sweetheart, that's gross contract value, not profit. And most of that money goes to materials and subcontractors anyway. I felt like I was going to be sick. Dad, you've committed fraud using my identity for $340,000 worth of work? It's not fraud when it's family. Yes, it is. It's exactly fraud. And the state investigators think I'm either a victim or a co-conspirator. Alexis, calm down. You're being dramatic about this. Dramatic? Dad, my business license could be revoked. I could face criminal charges. My entire career could be destroyed. That's not going to happen. I'll talk to the investigators, explain that it was all a misunderstanding. What misunderstanding? You deliberately used my license number without my permission. I used the family business credentials to help the family business succeed. That's not fraud. That's family. I hung up on him. 20 minutes later, my phone rang again. This time it was my mother, Linda. Alexis, your father is very upset. He said you accused him of fraud and hung up on him. Mom, did you know that Dad has been using my business license to sign construction contracts? Well, yes, but it's not like you're describing it. Your father explained that you two were working together now, combining your businesses. We're not working together. I didn't know anything about this until the state called me today. Sweetheart, I think there's been some miscommunication here. Your father said you'd given him permission to use your license for family business purposes. That's a lie, Mom. I never gave him permission to do anything with my license. Alexis, don't call your father a liar. There's obviously been some confusion, but calling him names isn't going to help. Mom, he forged my signature on state documents. That's not confusion. That's fraud. Your father would never forge anything. He's the most honest man I know. I almost laughed at the absurdity of that statement. Mom, the state investigators have documentation showing that contracts were signed using my license number for work I never did, never approved, and never even knew about. Well, maybe there's an explanation. Maybe someone else is using both of your business licenses without permission. The mental gymnastics were impressive. Rather than accept that her husband had committed fraud, Mom was inventing elaborate scenarios where we were both victims of some unknown third party. Mom, the phone number on these fraudulent contracts connects to Dad's business. The investigators traced it directly to him. Then someone must be impersonating his business too. Mom, Alexis, I know your father and he would never do anything to hurt your career. There has to be another explanation. That evening, I drove to my parents' house in Millerville Heights for what I hoped would be a rational family discussion about how to handle this situation. Instead, I walked into an intervention. My brother Jake was there, along with his wife Sarah. My uncle Robert, Dad's younger brother who worked as his business partner, was sitting in the living room looking uncomfortable, and Dad was pacing back and forth like a caged animal. Finally, Dad said when I walked in, now we can clear up this whole misunderstanding. What misunderstanding? Alexis, Mom said gently, We think you might be overreacting to what's essentially a paperwork issue. A paperwork issue? Jake stepped forward. Look, sis, I get that you're protective of your business, but Dad's not trying to hurt your company. He's trying to help the family. By committing fraud using my identity? By finding creative solutions to business problems, Uncle Robert said. Your father's been struggling with getting contracts because his credit took a hit during the recession. Using your license was just a way to level the playing field. I stared at them. You all knew about this? We knew Dad was working on some projects with better credentials, but we didn't know you hadn't approved it. How could you not know I hadn't approved it? When have I ever mentioned working with Dad's construction company? Well, Jake said, you're always so busy with your own work, we figured you were just keeping the collaboration quiet. Or, maybe I said slowly, you all assumed that because we're family, Dad had the right to use my professional credentials however he wanted. Alexis, Dad said, you're making this sound so sinister. I was helping our family business succeed using resources we had available. That's what families do. Resources we had available. Dad, my business license isn't a family resource. It's my professional credential that I earned through years of education and experience. But you're a Thornfield, Uncle Robert pointed out. The family name is on both businesses. It's natural that there would be some overlap. The family name doesn't give anyone the right to use my specific professional licensing. Alexis, Mom said, what harm has really been done? Your father got some work, the clients got their projects completed, everyone benefited. Mom, the state investigator said there are complaints about delays and quality issues. The clients are not happy. Those are just minor setbacks, Dad said quickly. Every construction project has challenges. What kind of challenges? Dad and Uncle Robert exchanged glances. Well, Uncle Robert said, there have been some issues with soil contamination at one of the sites. The clients are claiming we should have identified it before starting construction. My blood ran cold. What kind of soil contamination? Nothing major, just some old underground storage tanks that leaked a little bit. Dad, contaminated soil is exactly the kind of thing my environmental consulting business specializes in. If you'd actually hired me legitimately, I could have identified that issue before construction started. See, Dad said triumphantly, that's exactly why using your license made sense. You have the expertise to handle these issues.
But I didn't handle them. You signed contracts claiming to have environmental expertise that you don't actually have. Well, I figured if problems came up, you'd help us figure them out. So your plan was to commit fraud now and ask for my help cleaning up the mess later? Alexis, Jake said, don't you think you're being a little harsh? Dad made a mistake, but his heart was in the right place. His heart was in the right place when he forged my signature on legal documents. He didn't forge anything, Mom said firmly. There's been some kind of mix-up. I pulled out my phone and called the State Business Licensing Division's fraud hotline, putting it on speaker. State Business Licensing Division, Fraud Investigation Unit, this is Jennifer Walsh. Miss Walsh, this is Alexis Thornfield. We spoke earlier today about the unauthorized use of my license. Yes, Miss Thornfield. Have you had a chance to review the documentation we discussed? I'm actually with my family right now, and they seem to think there's been some kind of misunderstanding. Could you clarify exactly what documentation you have? Certainly. We have signed contracts for 3 construction projects in Millerville County, totaling $340,000 in value. Each contract bears the signature A. Thornfield and lists Thornfield Environmental Consulting as the licensed contractor. The contracts specify construction management, site preparation, and general contracting services. I looked around the room at my family's faces. And these signatures, I continued, do they match my signature on file with the state? That's part of our investigation, Miss Thornfield. We'll need you to provide handwriting samples for comparison. But I can tell you that the phone number listed for follow-up questions on these contracts connects to Thornfield Construction Services, not your environmental consulting firm.
I see. And what happens if these signatures turn out to be fraudulent? If someone forged your signature to obtain these contracts, we'll be referring the case to the district attorney's office for criminal prosecution. Business identity fraud is a serious felony in this state. I hung up and looked around the room. The festive intervention atmosphere had evaporated. So, I said quietly, are we still calling this a misunderstanding? Dad's face had gone pale. Alexis, you can't seriously be thinking about pressing charges against your own father. I'm not pressing charges, Dad. The state investigators are investigating fraud. If they determine that you forged my signature, they'll press charges. But you could tell them it was authorized, Mom said desperately. You could say you gave him permission. Mom, that would be lying to state investigators. That's also a crime. So you're going to let your father go to prison over a business dispute? I'm going to tell the truth about what happened. What the investigators do with that information is up to them. Jake stood up. Alexis, this is family. We protect each other. We protect each other by not committing crimes using each other's identities. So what's your solution? Dad demanded. Let my business fail? Let your Uncle Robert lose his job? Destroy the family over some paperwork? I looked around the room at my family, all of them looking at me like I was the problem, like my refusal to cover up Dad's fraud was the real issue. My solution, I said slowly, is to cooperate with the state investigation, tell the truth about what I knew and when I knew it, and let the legal system determine what crimes were committed. And what about family loyalty? Uncle Robert asked. What about it? Where was the family loyalty when Dad decided to risk my professional license and reputation without asking me? That's different, Mom said. He was trying to help the family succeed. He was trying to help himself succeed by using credentials he didn't earn and reputation he didn't build. Alexis, Dad said, his voice taking on a pleading tone, I'm sorry I didn't ask permission first, but can't we just work this out within the family? I'll add you as a partner in the construction business. We'll split the profits. Everyone wins. Dad, I don't want to be your partner. I have my own business that you've now put at risk. How is it at risk? Because the state investigators think I'm either a victim of fraud or a co-conspirator in fraud. If they determine I knew about this and approved it, I could lose my license for operating outside my scope of practice. But you didn't know about it, Sarah pointed out. Right, which means Dad committed fraud using my identity. So someone has to go down for this? Jake asked. Someone already went down for this when Dad forged my signature on state documents. I left my parents' house that night knowing that my relationship with my family would never be the same. They'd made it clear that they expected me to sacrifice my integrity and potentially my career to protect Dad from the consequences of his fraudulent actions. But what they didn't understand was that I'd worked too hard and too long to build my professional reputation to let it be destroyed by someone else's poor decisions, even if that someone was family. The next morning, I called Jennifer Walsh back and scheduled an appointment to provide handwriting samples and a complete statement about my knowledge of Dad's activities. Because sometimes protecting yourself means refusing to protect the people who put you at risk in the first place. And sometimes family loyalty means holding family members accountable for their actions rather than covering up their crimes. Dad was about to learn that forging my signature was the easy part. Living with the consequences was going to be much harder, especially when those consequences included a fraud investigation that I was now cooperating with fully. The daughter he tried to use as a shield was about to become the witness who exposed everything. The next morning, I woke up to 17 missed calls and 12 text messages from various family members, all variations on the same theme. I was being selfish, ungrateful, and vindictive for refusing to help Dad out of this minor situation. The most infuriating message came from my Aunt Patricia, Dad's sister, who texted, "Your father sacrificed everything to put you through college, and this is how you repay him?"
That text crystallized something I'd been thinking about all night. The narratives my family was spinning, that I owed Dad my cooperation because of his past support, was built on a foundation of lies I'd been accepting my entire adult life. I sat at my kitchen table in my downtown Riverside apartment with my laptop and started going through old financial records, emails, and documents. What I found was a pattern of manipulation and revisionist history that went back years.
First, the college tuition claim. I pulled up my old financial aid records from Westport University. Dad had contributed exactly $8,000 toward my 5-year degree program, money that came from a settlement when Uncle Robert was injured on a construction job. The other $47,000 had come from scholarships I'd earned, student loans in my name, and money I'd made working 3 part-time jobs. But somehow, over the years, Dad's $8,000 contribution had grown in family lore to paying for Alexis's entire education. Next, I looked at the timeline of my business formation. I'd started Thornfield Environmental Consulting in 2018, immediately after completing my master's degree. The initial capital, $15,000 for equipment, office setup, and operating expenses, had come entirely from my savings. I'd specifically chosen not to ask family for money because I wanted to build something that was completely mine. But according to the story Dad had been telling clients and family friends, he was a founding investor in my company who had provided the capital and connections that made my success possible. The connections claim was particularly galling. I pulled up my client acquisition records and realized that exactly 0 of my major clients had come through Dad's network. My biggest contracts had come from environmental firms I'd interned with during graduate school, professors who recommended me for projects, and networking events I'd attended on my own. Dad's connections in the construction industry had never translated into environmental consulting work because his clients needed dirt moved, not contamination analysis. But perhaps most infuriating was what I discovered when I dug into Dad's recent financial situation. I'd known his construction business was struggling, but I hadn't realized how badly or for how long. According to public records, Thornfield Construction Services had been operating at a loss for 3 consecutive years. Dad had defaulted on equipment loans, had multiple mechanics liens filed against him by subcontractors, and owed nearly $80,000 in back taxes to the state. He wasn't just stealing my license to level the playing field. He was using my credentials to commit fraud because his own business was essentially insolvent. And my family had known this. I found text messages in my phone from Mom dating back 8 months, asking if I could lend Dad money to cover payroll. Messages from Jake suggesting that maybe I could throw some environmental work Dad's way to help him out. Messages from Uncle Robert hinting that Dad was going through a rough patch and could use family support. I'd ignored or deflected these requests because I had my own business to run and my own expenses to cover. I assumed Dad's problems were temporary cash flow issues, not systematic business failure. Now I realized they'd all known Dad was in serious financial trouble, and instead of encouraging him to address his problems honestly, they'd helped him find ways to use my success to mask his failures. The phone rang. It was Mom. "Alexis, we need to talk. Your father is beside himself with worry." "He should be worried, Mom. He committed fraud." "Sweetheart, you're being very black and white about this. Business relationships are complicated. Sometimes family members help each other in ways that might look irregular to outsiders." "Mom, there's nothing irregular about this. Dad forged my signature on legal documents. That's not a gray area. But you could fix this if you wanted to. You could tell the investigators that you gave him permission to use your license." "That would be lying to state investigators, Mom. That's also a crime." "It would be supporting your family." "Supporting my family by committing perjury?" "Alexis, don't be so dramatic. It's just telling them what they want to hear, so this whole thing goes away." I was quiet for a moment, processing the casual way my mother was suggesting I commit a felony to protect my father from the consequences of his felony. "Mom, did you know Dad's business was failing?" "What do you mean failing?" "I mean losing money for 3 years, defaulting on loans, owing $80,000 in back taxes failing." There was a long pause. "Your father's business goes through cycles. Construction is seasonal." "Mom, this isn't seasonal. This is systematic failure. Dad's been operating an insolvent business for years." "That's not true. Your father's company has just been going through some challenges." "What challenges?" Well, the economy has been tough, and there's been a lot of competition for contracts, and some clients have been slowed to pay. Mom, those are excuses. Dad's been losing money because he's been taking on projects he's not qualified for and underbidding to get work. How would you know? You don't work in construction. Because I've seen his financial records. Jake sent me Dad's tax returns last year when you were asking me to co-sign a loan for him. Another pause. That was confidential information. Mom, you asked me to co-sign a loan. Of course I looked at his financial situation before deciding. And you said no. I said no because his business was already over-leveraged and couldn't support additional debt. So you knew your father was struggling and you refused to help him. I knew Dad was making bad business decisions and I refused to become financially responsible for those decisions. That's very cold, Alexis. That's very responsible, Mom. And if Dad had accepted his business model wasn't working, he could have pivoted or closed down instead of resorting to fraud. Your father has been in construction for 30 years. He's not going to give up his life's work because of a few bad years.
So instead, he's going to destroy my life's work by using my credentials fraudulently? Nobody's destroying anything. You're both in the same industry, more or less. It makes sense to combine resources. Environmental consulting and construction are not the same industry, Mom, and even if they were, you don't combine resources by forging someone's signature. Alexis, I think you're being very unforgiving about this. Your father made a mistake, but his intentions were good. His intentions were to save his failing business by using my successful business as collateral. That's a very cynical way to look at it. That's an accurate way to look at it. After I hung up, I called Jake. Jake, I need to ask you something directly, and I need you to be honest with me. Okay. How long have you known that Dad's business was failing? Failing is a strong word, Alexis. How long have you known he was losing money? Jake sighed. Look, Dad's been having some tough years. But that's not unusual in construction. Jake, I've seen his tax returns. He's been operating at a loss for 3 years and owes $80,000 in back taxes. Where did you get his tax returns? You sent them to me last year when Mom asked me to co-sign a loan. Right, and you said no? I said no because the numbers showed a business that couldn't service additional debt. So you knew Dad was struggling financially and you refused to help. I knew Dad was making poor business decisions, and I refused to enable those decisions. Alexis, he's our father. When family is in trouble, you help them. By committing fraud? By being flexible about business arrangements. Jake, there's nothing flexible about forging someone's signature on state documents. Look, maybe Dad didn't handle this the right way, but you could have prevented this whole situation by helping him when he asked. I was stunned by the logic. So this is my fault for not enabling Dad's failing business? It's your fault for being so rigid about family helping family. Family helping family doesn't involve identity theft. Identity theft? Alexis, you're being ridiculous. He used the family business name for family business purposes. My environmental consulting firm is not a family business. It's my business. But you're a Thornfield. The family name is involved. The family name doesn't give Dad the right to forge my signature. God, Alexis, you've really changed since you started making good money. You used to care about family. I still care about family. I just don't think caring about family means letting family members commit crimes using my identity. So what's your plan? Let Dad go to prison? My plan is to tell the truth and let the legal system determine what consequences are appropriate. That's cold, sis. Really cold. That afternoon, I got a call from Uncle Robert. Alexis, we need to talk. This investigation is getting out of hand. How so?
The state investigators called me this morning. They want to interview me about my knowledge of the contracts your father signed using your license. What did you tell them? I told them I'd need to speak with a lawyer before answering any questions. That's probably smart. Alexis, you need to understand something. If your father goes down for this, I go down too. I was his partner on these projects. Did you know he was using my license fraudulently? I knew he was using your license. I didn't know you hadn't approved it. Robert, when have I ever mentioned doing construction work? When have I ever been involved in Dad's projects? Well, I figured maybe you were working together quietly. Why would we work together quietly? I don't know, tax reasons, licensing reasons? I didn't ask too many questions. So you knew something irregular was happening, but you didn't want to know the details. I knew your father was finding creative solutions to business problems. Creative solutions like fraud? Robert, your father's been in trouble before and always found ways to work things out. I figured this was just another one of those situations. What do you mean he's been in trouble before? Robert was quiet for a moment. You don't know about the other stuff? What other stuff? The license suspension in 2015, the workers' compensation fraud investigation in 2017, the tax evasion thing in 2019. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. Dad has a history of fraud? Not fraud exactly, more like aggressive interpretation of regulations. Robert, what exactly happened in those cases? Look, Alexis, your father operates in a gray area sometimes. Construction is a tough business, and sometimes you have to be creative to survive. What happened in those cases? The license suspension was for doing electrical work without proper certification. The workers' comp thing was a misunderstanding about employee classification. The tax thing was about underreporting income. And how were these situations resolved? Your father worked out agreements with the agencies involved, paid some fines, agreed to additional oversight, that kind of thing. So he has a pattern of violating regulations and then negotiating settlements. He has a pattern of finding solutions that work for everyone involved. Everyone except the people whose licenses and reputations he puts at risk. Alexis, your father never meant to put you at risk. He put me at risk the moment he forged my signature. But you could minimize that risk by cooperating with his version of events. By lying to investigators? By being flexible about the details. I hung up and sat in my office staring at the wall. My father wasn't just someone who'd made one bad decision in a moment of desperation. He was someone with a pattern of fraudulent behavior spanning nearly a decade. And my entire family had been enabling this behavior by treating it as creative problem solving rather than criminal activity. They'd known about his license suspension, his fraud investigations, his tax evasion. They'd known he had a history of cutting corners and violating regulations. And when he decided to use my credentials to continue this pattern, they'd all assumed I would be fine with it.
The expectation wasn't that I would approve of Dad's actions. The expectation was that I would be trapped into covering for them because family loyalty trumped legal obligations. But they'd miscalculated something important. I wasn't the desperate, financially dependent daughter who needed family approval to survive. I was a successful business owner with my own professional reputation to protect. And I'd worked too hard to build something legitimate to let it be destroyed by someone else's pattern of fraud, even if that someone was family. The next morning, I had my appointment with Jennifer Walsh at the State Business Licensing Division. I brought copies of all the financial records I'd reviewed, documentation of my business formation and client acquisition, and a detailed timeline of my knowledge about Dad's activities. I also brought something else.
A written statement about Dad's history of regulatory violations and my family's pattern of enabling his behavior. Because if Dad thought he could use my credentials as a shield for his fraud, he was about to learn that I could use those same credentials as a weapon against him. The daughter he'd tried to implicate was about to become the witness who exposed everything. The State Business Licensing Division offices in downtown Westport were nothing like I'd expected. Instead of the sterile government building I'd imagined, Jennifer Walsh's office was modern and professional, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the harbor and walls lined with framed certificates and commendations for fraud investigation excellence. "Ms. Thornfield," Jennifer said, gesturing to a chair across from her desk, "thank you for coming in. Before we begin, I want you to understand that this is a formal interview and everything you tell me will be documented as part of our investigation." "I understand." She activated a digital recorder and began with basic questions about my business formation, licensing, and normal scope of operations. Then she pulled out a FIC folder. "Now let's discuss the contracts in question. I'm going to show you 3 signed agreements, and I'd like you to examine the signatures attributed to you." The first contract was for site preparation and general contracting services for a retail development in Millerville. The signature read A. Thornfield in what looked like a crude attempt to mimic my handwriting. The contract value was $127,000. The second was for construction management on a residential subdivision. Same fake signature, contract value $98,000. The third was the most damaging: environmental site assessment and construction services for a commercial project near the Riverside waterfront. This one was for $115,000 and specifically claimed environmental expertise I'd never provided. "These signatures," I said slowly, "are definitely not mine." "You're certain?" "Absolutely. Look at the letter formation on the A. I write it completely differently, and the way the T connects to the H in Thornfield is wrong." Jennifer made notes. "Have you ever provided your father with blank letterhead, signature stamps, or any other materials he could have used to create these documents?" "Never. I've never given him any business materials, and I keep all my official documents in a locked file cabinet in my office." "Has your father ever had access to your office or business files?" "Not to my knowledge. He's never even visited my office." Jennifer pulled out another document. "This is interesting, Ms. Thornfield. We've discovered that someone called the State Licensing Verification Hotline 3 times in the past 6 months, asking about the scope of services covered under your environmental consulting license." My stomach dropped. "What kind of questions?" "Specifically asking whether environmental consulting licenses cover construction management, site preparation, and general contracting services." "And what did the state tell them?" "That environmental consulting licenses cover assessment, testing, and remediation planning, but not construction services." The caller was advised that construction work would require a separate general contractor's license. So whoever called knew they were operating outside the legal scope of my license. "Exactly. And Miss Thornfield, we have the caller's phone number from our system logs." She showed me a printout. The number belonged to Thornfield Construction Services. "That's my father's business line," I confirmed. Jennifer made more notes. "So someone from your father's business specifically researched the limitations of your license, was told that exactly those services using your credentials. That sounds like premeditation to me." "It sounds like premeditation to us, too." She pulled out yet another folder. "Miss Thornfield, what I'm about to share with you is confidential investigative information, but you have a right to know since your identity and license are involved." "Okay." "Your father's business practices have been under investigation by multiple state agencies for several years. In addition to our fraud investigation, he's currently being reviewed by the Department of Labor for workers' compensation violations, the Department of Revenue for tax evasion, and the Occupational Safety and Health Administration for repeated safety violations." I felt like the room was spinning. Multiple agencies? Yes, and here's what's particularly interesting. In each case, when investigators have tried to contact your father, he's referred them to Thornfield Environmental Consulting as his compliance partner. What does that mean?
It means he's been telling other state agencies that your company handles regulatory compliance for his construction projects, environmental permits, safety assessments, worker protection protocols. He's been claiming that you provide all of these services. But I don't provide those services, and I've never worked with his company. We know, but the other agencies didn't know that until we started sharing information this week. Jennifer opened her laptop and showed me a spreadsheet. Miss Thornfield, this is a comprehensive list of every time your business license number has been referenced in state filings over the past 2 years.
The list was extensive. Dozens of permit applications, compliance reports, and regulatory filings, all claiming that Thornfield Environmental Consulting was providing services I'd never heard of for projects I'd never seen. My father has been using my license number on state documents for 2 years? Based on our investigation, yes, the contracts that triggered our initial inquiry were just the tip of the iceberg. I stared at the computer screen, trying to process the scope of what my father had done. This wasn't just 3 fraudulent contracts. This was a systematic 2-year campaign of using my credentials to legitimize his failing business. Miss Thornfield, there's something else you need to know. We've been in contact with the clients whose projects are listed in these contracts. What did they say? They're all reporting significant problems: delayed timelines, cost overruns, work that doesn't meet code requirements. And when they've tried to get resolution, your father has told them that any technical issues need to be addressed with his environmental compliance partner, meaning you. So clients think I'm responsible for problems I had nothing to do with? Exactly. And some of them are considering legal action against both Thornfield Construction Services and Thornfield Environmental Consulting. The implications hit me like a freight train. Not only had my father committed fraud using my identity, but he'd set me up to be legally responsible for his incompetent work. Jennifer, what are my legal options here? Well, as the victim of identity theft, you have several options. You can file a criminal complaint against your father, pursue civil litigation for damages to your business reputation, and request that the state take action to prevent further misuse of your credentials. What kind of state action? We can issue a formal cease and desist order prohibiting your father from any further use of your license number. We can also red flag your credentials in our system so that any future fraudulent use will trigger immediate investigation. What about the existing problems, the clients who think I'm responsible for his bad work? We'll send formal notifications to all affected parties explaining that you were not involved in these projects and that any work performed was done without your knowledge or authorization. And what about my father? Jennifer's expression grew serious. Miss Thornfield, based on our investigation, your father is facing multiple felony charges: business identity fraud, filing false documents with state agencies, and potentially racketeering if we can prove this was part of a larger pattern of organized fraud. Racketeering? Your father hasn't been operating alone. Our investigation has revealed that several other individuals were aware of and participated in this scheme. His brother Robert, who served as project manager on fraudulent contracts, his accountant, who prepared tax documents claiming deductions for services never provided, possibly others. So this is bigger than just my father using my license. Much bigger. We believe your father was running an organized fraud operation using multiple stolen or misrepresented credentials to obtain contracts his company wasn't qualified for. Jennifer closed the laptop and looked at me directly. Miss Thornfield, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest. Of course. Have you received any pressure from family members to change your story or refuse to cooperate with our investigation? Yes, significant pressure. What kind of pressure? Phone calls, text messages, and in-person meetings where family members have suggested that I should tell you that I authorized my father's use of my license? They've asked you to lie to state investigators? Multiple family members have suggested that I should support the family by telling you what you want to hear so this goes away. Jennifer made careful notes.
Ms. Thornfield, witness intimidation is also a crime. If family members continue to pressure you to change your testimony, I need you to document those contacts and report them to us immediately. I will. There's one more thing I need to tell you. This investigation has been ongoing for longer than you might think. What do you mean? We've been monitoring your father's business activities for 8 months. The fraudulent contracts using your license were what gave us probable cause to obtain search warrants and subpoena records. So, you've been investigating him since before I knew any of this was happening? Yes, and Ms. Thornfield, your cooperation has been invaluable, but it's not the only evidence we have. We have financial records, recorded phone calls with state agencies, testimony from subcontractors who were told you were supervising their work. The case against your father is very strong regardless of your testimony. Why are you telling me this? Because I want you to understand that your decision to cooperate with us isn't what's going to determine your father's fate. Your father's criminal actions are what determined his fate. Your cooperation is just helping us document the full scope of the fraud and protect other potential victims. After the interview, I sat in my car in the parking garage for a long time, trying to process everything I'd learned. My father hadn't just made one desperate decision to use my license. He'd been systematically defrauding clients, state agencies, and me for 2 years. He'd used my reputation to obtain contracts he couldn't qualify for, my credentials to file false documents with multiple state agencies, and my identity to shield himself from regulatory oversight. And when clients complained about his substandard work, he directed them to me, setting me up to be legally responsible for problems I had no part in creating. This wasn't a family member making a mistake. This was a criminal using family relationships to facilitate fraud. My phone rang. It was Dad. "Alexis, we need to talk, right now." "I just finished my interview with the state investigators." "What did you tell them?" "I told them the truth."
Alexis, you don't understand what you've done. This is going to destroy the whole family. Dad, I'm not the one who destroyed anything. You've been using my license fraudulently for 2 years. 2 years? What are you talking about? The investigators showed me documentation going back 2 years. Permit applications, compliance reports, regulatory filings, all using my license number for services I never provided. There was a long silence. Dad? Alexis, I can explain all of that. I'm listening. Look, sometimes in construction, you need to show regulatory compliance, and environmental permits are part of that process. I was just using your license to demonstrate that we had environmental expertise available. Dad, I never provided environmental expertise for your projects. But you could have, if issues had come up. That's not how licensing works. You can't claim services you're not actually providing. Alexis, you're being very technical about this. I'm being accurate about this. Look, sweetheart, I know you're angry, but you need to think about the bigger picture here. If I go to prison, your mother loses her health insurance. Uncle Robert loses his job. The whole family suffers. Dad, I didn't create this situation. You did. But you can fix it. You can tell the investigators that we had an informal partnership arrangement. That would be lying. That would be protecting your family. Dad, the investigators told me that lying to them is also a crime. They're trying to scare you, Alexis. They want you to testify against your own father. They want me to tell the truth about what happened. And what's going to happen to this family when I'm in prison? I don't know, Dad. What was going to happen to my career when clients started suing me for your bad work? That wouldn't have happened. Dad, you've been telling clients that I'm responsible for compliance on projects I've never seen. When those projects fail inspections or don't meet code requirements, those clients are going to sue me. I would have handled any problems that came up. The way you handled the soil contamination issue? By telling clients they should have hired an environmental consultant? How did you know about that? The investigators told me.
They've been talking to your clients, Dad. The ones who are reporting delays, cost overruns, and substandard work. Those are just normal construction challenges. No, Dad. Those are the consequences of taking on work you're not qualified to perform, using credentials you don't have the right to use. Alexis, you need to think very carefully about what you're doing here. Once you testify against me, there's no taking it back. I'm not testifying against you, Dad. I'm testifying about what I know and when I knew it. That's the same thing. No, it's not. You created this situation by committing fraud. I'm just refusing to commit additional crimes to cover up your crimes. So you're going to let me go to prison? I'm going to let the legal system determine what consequences are appropriate for the crimes you committed. Alexis, I'm your father, and I'm your victim. The silence that followed was absolute. You really see it that way? He asked finally. Dad, you stole my identity, damaged my professional reputation, and set me up to be legally responsible for your failures. How else should I see it? I see it as family helping family. Family helping family doesn't involve identity theft and fraud. Fine, Alexis. If that's how you want to play this, fine. But don't expect the family to welcome you back when this is all over. Dad, if the family's idea of loyalty is helping each other commit crimes, then maybe I don't want to be welcomed back. After I hung up, I called Jennifer Walsh. Jennifer, it's Alexis Thornfield. My father just called and tried to pressure me to change my testimony. What did he say? He asked me to tell investigators that we had an informal partnership arrangement. When I refused, he threatened that the family wouldn't welcome me back if I continued to cooperate. I'll document this contact. Miss Thornfield, is there anything else you think we should know about your father's business practices? I thought about the conversation I'd just had, about Dad's casual attitude towards demonstrating compliance, and his expectation that I would fix any problems that arose. Jennifer, I think my father genuinely believes that using other people's credentials is normal business practice. He doesn't seem to understand that what he did was criminal. That's consistent with our profile of his behavior pattern. Miss Thornfield, we expect to make arrests within the next 2 weeks. Are you prepared for that? As prepared as I can be. And are you prepared for the possibility that other family members might be charged as well? I thought about Uncle Robert's admission that he'd known something irregular was happening, but hadn't asked questions. About the accountant, who had prepared false tax documents. About the family members who are now pressuring me to lie to investigators. Yes, I'm prepared for that. Good, because this investigation is about more than just your father now. It's about dismantling an organized fraud operation that's been harming clients and defrauding state agencies for years. Jennifer, can I ask you something? Of course. When you arrest my father, will you also be taking action to protect my business from further fraudulent use? Absolutely. We're preparing a comprehensive cease and desist order that will prohibit anyone from using your credentials without written authorization. We're also working with other state agencies to red flag your license number so any future fraudulent use triggers immediate investigation. Thank you. Miss Thornfield, I want you to know that your cooperation has been exceptional. Many fraud victims, especially when family members are involved, are reluctant to fully cooperate with investigations. I'm not protecting someone who victimized me just because we share DNA. Good for you. And, Miss Thornfield, based on our investigation, I think you're going to come out of this stronger. Your business reputation is going to be cleared, your credentials are going to be protected, and you're going to have legal recourse against anyone who damaged your professional standing.
That evening, I drafted a letter to all my current and potential clients explaining that I was cooperating with a state investigation into the fraudulent use of my business credentials by family members. I included contact information for the state investigators and offered to provide documentation of my legitimate business activities. Then, I updated my business insurance to include coverage for identity theft and professional liability related to fraudulent use of my credentials. Finally, I changed the locks on my office and upgraded my document security systems. Because while my family was busy trying to pressure me into covering up crimes, I was busy protecting myself from being victimized again. The daughter they thought they could manipulate was about to watch their entire fraud operation get dismantled by the state authorities I was cooperating with. And this time, when Dad tried to use family relationships to escape consequences, he was going to discover that some relationships aren't strong enough to withstand criminal betrayal. The arrests happened on a Thursday morning at 6 a.m. I was getting ready for work when Jennifer Walsh called me. "Miss Thornfield, I wanted to let you know that we're executing arrest warrants this morning. Your father, uncle, and 2 other associates are being taken into custody." I sat down heavily on my couch. Even though I'd been expecting this, hearing it actually happen felt surreal. What happens now? They'll be processed and arraigned this afternoon. The charges include business identity fraud, filing false documents with state agencies, and conspiracy to commit fraud. Your father is also being charged with witness intimidation based on the phone call you reported. How long will they be held? That depends on bail decisions and whether they can post bond. But Miss Thornfield, there's something else you should know. We found additional evidence during the searches this morning. What kind of evidence? Your father had files in his office containing forged documents with your signature going back 3 years. Not just the contracts we already knew about, but permit applications, insurance claims, and regulatory compliance reports. We're talking about dozens of fraudulent documents. I closed my eyes. 3 years. He'd been stealing my identity and destroying my professional reputation for 3 years while I built my business completely unaware. There's more, Jennifer continued. We also found evidence that your father was planning to expand the fraud operation. He had partially completed applications to register Thornfield Environmental Construction as a new business entity, using your credentials as the qualifying professional. He was going to start a new company using my license? Yes, and based on the business plan we found, he was planning to offer comprehensive environmental and construction services using my environmental consulting license and a general contractor license he was apparently planning to obtain fraudulently. The scope of his planned fraud was breathtaking. He wasn't just stealing my existing credentials, he was planning to build an entire fraudulent business empire using my professional reputation as the foundation. My phone started ringing immediately after I hung up with Jennifer. First Mom, then Jake, then various aunts and uncles I hadn't heard from in months. I let them all go to voicemail. The voicemails were a mixture of panic, anger, and blame. "Alexis, your father's been arrested. How could you let this happen? I hope you're happy now that you've destroyed the family. The bail is set at $50,000. We need you to help us get him out. This is all your fault for being so vindictive about a simple misunderstanding." But the most revealing voicemail came from Uncle Robert, calling from jail. "Alexis, this is getting out of hand. The prosecutors are offering plea deals if we cooperate and provide information about David's other business activities. I need you to know that I might have to tell them about things you probably don't want them to know about." The threat was clear. Cooperate with us, or we'll drag you down too. I called Jennifer immediately. "Jennifer, I just got a voicemail from my uncle that sounds like he's threatening to implicate me in something if I don't help with their defense." "What exactly did he say?" I played the voicemail for her over the phone. "Miss Thornfield, this is another criminal act, attempting to coerce a witness. We'll be adding additional charges. But I'm curious about his reference to things you probably don't want them to know about.
Is there anything in your business relationship with your father that you haven't told us? Nothing. I've never had any business relationship with my father. I've never worked with him, never provided him with services, never collaborated on any projects. Then your uncle is either misinformed or he's making empty threats to pressure you. What should I do if family members keep contacting me? Document everything and don't respond directly. Your family members are now criminal defendants, and any communication with you could be considered witness tampering. That afternoon, I got a call from someone unexpected. Tyler Morrison, the attorney who'd been representing one of Dad's clients in a contract dispute. Miss Thornfield, I represent Riverside Development Group in their lawsuit against Thornfield Construction Services. I understand from the state investigators that you were not actually involved in the environmental assessment work that was supposedly performed on our client's project. That's correct. I've never worked on any project for your client. I see. Miss Thornfield, our client paid an additional $47,000 for environmental services that were supposedly provided by your company. Those services were never actually performed, which resulted in significant delays and cost overruns when contamination was discovered during construction. I'm sorry that happened, but I had no knowledge of any agreement with your client. We understand that now. Miss Thornfield, we're dropping all claims against you and your company, but we'd like to ask if you'd be willing to serve as an expert witness in our lawsuit against your father.
Expert witness? Yes. We need someone to testify about what environmental assessment procedures should have been followed, what the standard of care is in environmental consulting, and how your father's failure to provide actual environmental services damaged our client. I thought about it. Dad had not only stolen my credentials, but it also damaged the reputation of environmental consulting in general by providing substandard services under the guise of environmental expertise. I'd be willing to consider that. Excellent. And, Miss Thornfield, our client wanted me to tell you that they're impressed by your cooperation with the state investigation. They recognize that you're as much a victim in this situation as they are. After I hung up, I realized something had fundamentally changed. Instead of being seen as potentially complicit in Dad's fraud, I was now being recognized as a fellow victim and a valuable expert witness. The phone rang again. This time, it was Mom. Alexis, we need to talk. Your father is sitting in jail and you're the only one who can fix this. Mom, I can't fix anything. Dad committed crimes using my identity. The bail is $50,000. If you would just post bond, we could get him out and work on resolving this as a family. Mom, I'm not posting bail for someone who defrauded me. He's your father, and I'm his victim. Alexis, the lawyer says that if your father pleads guilty, he could go to prison for 10 years. 10 years! Is that really what you want? Mom, I don't want Dad to go to prison. I wanted Dad not to commit fraud using my identity. But you could prevent the prison time by testifying that you had authorized his use of your license. That would be perjury, Mom. I would go to prison for lying under oath. So, you'd rather your father go to prison than risk any consequences yourself? I'd rather tell the truth and let the legal system work than commit additional crimes to cover up Dad's crimes. That's very selfish, Alexis. What's selfish is expecting me to sacrifice my freedom and integrity to protect someone who victimized me. He never meant to hurt you. He stole my identity for 3 years, Mom. He damaged my professional reputation, put my business at risk, and set me up to be legally responsible for his failures. How is that not intentionally hurting me? Because he's family. Family doesn't hurt family on purpose. Family doesn't steal from family either. 3 days later, I got the call I'd been dreading. Jake. Alexis, Dad's taking a plea deal. What kind of plea deal? He's pleading guilty to business identity fraud and filing false documents.
In exchange, the prosecution is dropping the racketeering and conspiracy charges. What's his sentence? 18 months in federal prison, 5 years probation, and full restitution to all victims. Including me? Including you. Dad has to pay you for damages to your business, lost income, and legal fees. How does the family feel about that? How do you think we feel? Dad's going to prison because his own daughter refused to help him. Dad's going to prison because he committed multiple felonies over a 3-year period. That's not how we see it. How do you see it? We see a family member who was struggling and asked for help, and another family member who chose legal technicalities over family loyalty. Legal technicalities like don't forge someone's signature and don't steal someone's professional credentials. Alexis, you could have prevented all of this by being more flexible about family business arrangements. There were no family business arrangements, Jake. There was fraud. And now Dad's life is ruined. Dad ruined his own life by choosing to commit crimes instead of addressing his business problems honestly. So, you have no regrets about any of this? I thought about that question seriously. Did I regret that my father was going to prison? Yes. Did I regret that my family relationships were permanently damaged? Yes. But did I regret refusing to cover up crimes or sacrifice my integrity to protect someone who had victimized me? No, Jake, I don't regret telling the truth. Then I guess we have nothing else to talk about. 6 months later, my business had not only recovered, but was thriving. The state investigation had cleared my professional reputation completely, and the publicity had actually brought me new clients who were impressed by my integrity and cooperation with law enforcement. I'd received full restitution from Dad's plea agreement, $127,000, to cover business damages, lost income, and legal fees. I'd also successfully sued Dad's insurance company for coverage of the fraudulent contracts, recovering an additional $89,000. More importantly, the state had implemented new protections to prevent professional license fraud, partly based on recommendations I'd made during the investigation. But the most satisfying moment came when I received a letter from the State Business Licensing Division. Dear Ms. Thornfield, the division would like to commend you for your cooperation in our investigation of business license fraud. Your willingness to prioritize legal compliance over personal relationships was instrumental in dismantling an organized fraud operation and protecting other potential victims. The division is pleased to recommend you for our Professional Integrity Award, which recognizes licensed professionals who demonstrate exceptional ethical standards in challenging circumstances. Dad received released from federal prison after serving 14 months. He never contacted me directly, but I heard through mutual acquaintances that he'd moved to another state and was working as a construction laborer, the only construction work he was legally qualified to perform. Uncle Robert served 6 months and lost his contractor's license permanently. The accountant who had prepared fraudulent tax documents received probation and lost his CPA certification. My family never forgave me for choosing the legal system over family loyalty, but I'd learned something important. A family that expects you to commit crimes to prove your loyalty isn't a family worth belonging to.
The woman who had once been pressured to sacrifice her integrity for family peace had become someone who understood that real peace comes from living with integrity, regardless of who that integrity might inconvenience. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for someone is refuse to enable their destructive behavior, even when that someone is family, especially when that someone is family. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.